Okay, so season 1 was good, but those season 2 setups are insane. Welcome back, everyone. Hello, my name's Amanda, or you might know me as Vamp. We are here. We are back to talk about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, the full season 1 review. I just finished season 1. I have a lot of thoughts. We'll get into that. I've changed my mind on some things. I've seen some things that I gotta say, some things have impressed me in these last 2 episodes. Some pieces of the puzzle really coming together here. So, what is this show about? Let me just give you a brief little rundown. It's basically a multiversal story that takes inspiration from the MCU and from Marvel Comics to give us the origin of Spider-Man, again, for the millionth time. But this time, we're keeping it fresh by providing a different take on some of Spider-Man's story here, mixing it up because it's the multiverse. Along the way, we also, of course, are introduced to other characters from Spider-Man and Marvel Comics, some of which we might be more or less familiar with, and whose origins may be less or more familiar to us. Before we get into this review, heads up, I will be talking about the show I just watched, so spoilers in effect, and we are going to be talking about everything. So I really mean spoilers in effect. Let's start off with one of my favorite things about this show, the thing that really made me see some more of the light of why people are really loving this show. I mean, the show is insanely well rated right now, guys. It's pretty crazy. I would say what really surprised me at the end here was just how good this story is. And I was saying, although I wasn't, dying to watch the next episodes or anything like that, like I had to watch them. It wasn't like the Penguin. I wasn't on the edge of my seat or anything. I was very curious to see where the story went because I felt the story was moving really nicely, but the ending really, they just really made it come full circle, literally, because it's a time loop, which I kind of love. And it also built perfectly into seeds that they'd been planning throughout this entire season to build to the finale that we got with Norman wanting to get into space travel. And there's been little hints at stuff like this throughout. Even the stuff that happens with Nico at the end. Little hints throughout. And so I love when that happens because it feels really gratifying as a viewer when you have a good build for a story like this and then the ending delivers. I mean, the biggest part to a story, it really is that ending. If you have a terrible ending, it doesn't matter how good your story is, a lot of the times your story is just going to be written off. I mean, look at what happened with Game of Thrones in terms of the show adaptation. Like, yikes. So with this, something I was pleasantly surprised by was that the show's finale was as satisfying as it was. And of course, like I said, they weren't afraid to hint at everything coming in season 2. Which, if you're wondering, should we be worried that they dropped all these exciting things and then will we get a season 2? They've actually already been renewed for season 2 and season 3, I believe. So if you're a fan of this show, good news for you. Season 2, it's locked and loaded. And there's a lot to get excited for at the end. In fact, I'm very excited for season 2. I'm surprisingly excited for season 2 of this series. There's a lot of stuff that it builds towards, but I'll just touch on a few of the things at the end that stood out to me and why I'm excited about them. So first off, the conversation that Spider-Man has with Doctor Strange at the end of the show, where he asks Doctor Strange if he's been to the future and what's coming up so he can be prepared. And Doctor Strange says, I think you're prepared either way. And one of the things that Spider-Man talks about in that conversation is this idea of accepting that in a lot of ways, things are just meant to kind of happen. Things work out the way they're supposed to work out, whether they're bad or good. Ultimately, this is where you're supposed to be. And so you just kind of got to take life as it comes at you and accept it and kind of make the most of things. And just acknowledge that although you've been through bad things, it's what puts you on the path you're on today. And there's something kind of beautiful about that. I love this as a message. So first of all, points for a great message. But 2, this also kind of reminded me the sort of faded feeling or approach that Peter has to being Spider-Man and the tragedy he's gone through in his life and kind of that it put him on this path. And in a way, it's all as it's meant to be, is that it reminds me of spider totems. I don't know if we're going to spider totems, okay? I'm not saying we are. or anything like that. It just gave me a sort of this whole faded, and the fact that it's a time loop that causes Peter to get his powers. It feels a little faded, but I'm kind of into it because I kind of like spider totems. I know not everyone does. If you don't know what spider totems are, it's a concept that was introduced in the comics, which is basically that instead of it being sort of a freak scientific accident that gives Peter his powers, and his powers being based more in science, that he was actually always destined to become Spider-Man. And there are multiple Spider-Man throughout the multiverse, or spider people, spider totems, who are connected to the spider spirit, and sort of through that are fated to become spider-powered people. Spider people, you know what I mean? And so that is what spider totems are, and it's this concept that was introduced in the comics that basically implies that Spider-Man was destined to become Spider-Man. Now, some people don't like that because it kind of removes the science angle. It makes it like Peter isn't just a kid that this happened to. It was always destined, so he becomes like a chosen one. And a lot of people don't like that for Peter because it takes away him being like an everyman a little bit. I think spider totems can be really fun, and I think, and also just from a multiversal perspective, because they basically imply that, you know, there are spider people in all of these different universes. Something that we also see explored in the concept behind Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and probably Beyond the Spider-Verse as well when that comes out, is that idea that like there's just spider people everywhere and that's how it's meant to be. And there are certain things that also you don't want to change in your story because could mess it up, so you can't interfere with that. So that is something that I just picked up on. I don't know if it'll go anywhere. I've talked too much about this. Now let me move on. The other thing is that we had all of these little hints pointing towards space, and it was only in the second to last episode I started picking up on them really and was like, there's been a lot of space stuff. And that thing at the beginning looked like a symbiote. And then before episode 8, they have the recap and they showed all of that from the beginning with Doctor Strange and the symbiote, or what appears to be a symbiote. And I was like, okay, is this where we're going with this? And that is where we were going with that, with Norman and his portal to space that he wanted to build. And at the end, we see Norman with the symbiote, which might not be Venom, could be Venom. Either way, I think this is where we might be getting some Goblin stuff coming in. Some Green Goblin stuff might be from the fact that Norman will be the one to bond with it, which would also be very different. I don't think we've done that anywhere else. Either that or Norman's just going to study it in a lab, but I would not be surprised if Norman ends up becoming some form of a Venom in this universe. Harry is also setting up his business, W.E.B, Worldwide Engineering Brigade, and that was very interesting, especially all the names he had on his whiteboard. Woo! They were like, let's just let the nerds enjoy this. We're gonna drop a bunch of names, and you know, we love when you do that. We love it because it means we get to soak up all the little crumbs that you're leaving for us and say, what will happen? Where are we going with this? So a couple takeaways. I mean, obviously we have Finesse as well, and if you don't know Finesse, who appears at the end of this with Daredevil, she was also in the Oscorp internship as well, and we find out that she was undercover there. She's also one of the names that's on this whiteboard. If you don't know Finesse, though, she is from the comics, and she is from Avengers Academy. So Avengers Academy could be a direction, maybe a little bit of Avengers Academy in here. Although ultimately W.E.B was kind of giving me more of like Avengers Idea Mechanics vibes, which if you don't know that, that's Roberto da Costa, Sunspot's version of AIM. He basically takes over AIM and makes it like a think tank. So it's also giving me those vibes, but the names on the board are from really all over the place. There's really no one thing here. We got Finesse is on there, her name's on there. We got Electro's name on there. We got Ned Leeds obviously is on there. You got Kaden Nixon. Kaden is from NYX, and she actually just recently reappeared in the NYX comics. We also have a newer Captain Marvel character, Ripley Ryan, who is known as Star and is a villain in Captain Marvel, who first appeared, I think, in like 2019? I think? Maybe not 2019, but the series is from 2019. So that is another character that's just on that board. It's so random, and I love that it's so random. Who's Benjamin Anders? Am I supposed to know who that is? Can you tell me who that is? I didn't know that one, and I was trying to figure it out, and the best I could come up with was Timothy Anders, who is Normie's friend. And if you don't know Normie Osborn is the grandson of Norman Osborn. He ends up being Harry and Liz's child, Harry Osborn and Liz Allen in the comics. So I don't know if that's a reference to that. Probably not. I don't know. But let me know what you think. Other than that, I'm just finding like a designer. Could be a reference to that. They could have worked for Marvel. I don't know. But I like that there's things I don't know. That's exciting to me. Nico talks to her amulet, which, yeah, that was a whole thing. So I'm glad I picked up on that. And I'm glad we're doing something with it. And I'm glad there's magical elements with Nico. Otherwise, I would have been really disappointed. So she talks to her amulet and talks to her mom, which is kind of crazy considering the comic book origin for Nico, which I'm assuming is going to be different. I'm assuming we're not doing the same story because Nico seemed pretty happy to talk to her mom. We also have Otto sharing his project finally while he's in prison, which is, of course, what I expected it would be. Is tentacles. He's making tentacles. Overall, what I really like about this show is not just the story beats, but the voice acting really supports like just how good this story is. The emotion is really there. And though I don't always connect with that emotion, it's not necessarily bringing me to tears or anything. I appreciate the depth of the voice acting that we have in this show. I think for other people, they probably are being moved by it. I think it has to do with your connection to the characters and to the moments that they're going through. And like I said, sometimes it does kind of just feel a little bit like there's a little bit of a disconnect for me, maybe just because it's a younger kind of feeling show. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But mostly, I just wanted to touch on the fact that I'm just so impressed with all of the characters and all of the voice acting in this cast. I really had a fun time with all of it. Even Nico at the end brought me around with the fact that we're getting some mystical stuff in there. It's similar, but it's clearly very different. But I kind of respect that. I'm still a little nervous about it because I'm just wondering like what we're gonna be doing with that. But we gotta wait till season 2 to find out more, which I'll be back. I'll be back for season 2 because I'm liking it. I mean, something that I really like about this show is that it's not afraid to do new things. I mean, that's not always a bad thing, you know? It can be fun. It keeps it fresh. I do feel that some of these moments, though, are still kind of juvenile. I haven't really changed my opinion on that. However, you know, it's just, I just need to suspend my disbelief a little bit more. It doesn't ruin the show for me. It doesn't really detract from the show. But they did it again kind of at the end here with Lonnie deciding to go back to the 1/10th. I was like, you really don't need to. Like, really, you could just not have a gang. You defeated Scorpion. There could just be no gangs. Do you need to run a gang? Is that really necessary, Lonnie? Lonnie, you seem like a nice young man. But, you know, I guess Lonnie has a taste of power now with him getting his strength and sort of durability powers and becoming Tombstone. I guess is why we're still doing this. I feel like Lonnie could have left before and then Lonnie really could leave now and he's just going back into it. So I guess we'll see how that unfolds. I understand that I'm supposed to watch Lonnie's story and mourn the loss of all of the great things he could be, and I am doing that. So in that regard, it's a successful story. It just frustrates me a little. And you know, before I was talking about the costumes in my previous review, and I still feel that that was a bit goofy, but it was fun. So like I said, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief, and it's fine. Ultimately, it doesn't bother me that much. It's a nitpick. It prevents me from loving the show as much as I would like to love the show, I think, ultimately, but I still think it's a good show. What I really love about this show, though, is that it's not afraid to blend these two ideas of giving us something new, well, honoring what's come before and giving us something classic to enjoy. And I feel like, you know, honestly, although I'm not as big a fan of this theme song, the theme song really sums it up beautifully with it sampling from the 60s Spider-Man cartoon, but then remixing it, reworking it, and modernizing it. For better or for worse, that's really what the show does, and I think it does it pretty well. I don't think everybody's gonna be here for it, but I think a lot of people will be here for it. I think more will be here for it than won't. And that me not being like stars in my eyes watching this, I am not in the majority with it, I think. I think the thing I'm most excited about with this show is that I admire what it's trying to do, and I feel it's going to bring in a whole new wave of Spider-Man fans into comic book shops, and also just make a lot of long-time Spider-Man fans happy, because it does honor a lot of things, and there's a lot of characters and references and suits and just so many elements of the comics. I mean, something that I really even love about the animation, which this has been going on the whole time. I didn't talk about this in my previous review. It didn't linger with me like it did with those last 2 episodes, but the fact that it's done in comic panels at moments, I just think that's so fun, and it reminds me of Into the Spider-Verse, and I love that about Into the Spider-Verse, how it feels like a comic book as a movie. This has elements of that. It's not as well done as Into the Spider-Verse is, but it's really, really cute, and as a comic book fan, I really like it. Needless to say, I'm very curious to see where it goes with season 2. I will be back for that, and I think one of the best things about this show is that ending. The last 5 minutes of episode 10, where it just tells us where it's gonna go with season 2 and plants seeds for that season. And something that this show has proven to me it's good at is giving us breadcrumbs and then building something beautiful out of all those breadcrumbs, building us a big juicy piece of bread. Would you eat a piece of bread that's made out of breadcrumbs? I don't know, but it just feels really rewarding. It takes us to a place, it guides us there, and you get there and you go, this feels right. I was led here and I am happy about it. So even though I'm keeping my rating the same, I'm gonna stick with a 3 out of 5 for me, because although I enjoyed it, it just didn't sing like some other shows have sung for me, and it didn't feel as grounded as some other shows. I am very curious to see where it goes, especially the relationship between Norman and Harry, which I think is going to be very interesting in season 2. I think season 2, I might even rate it better based on what they've set up here. Season 2 might be even more well-liked for me. That might get a higher rating than season 1 will for me anyways. So let me know what you're thinking of the show. Let me know if you liked it, didn't like it, have you watched it yet, why not, and how are you feeling about the direction that they have for Spider-Man? Do you like that it's multiversal? Do you not? How do you feel about these character adaptations? How do you feel about the acting? I'd love to hear about it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I will see you next time, and until then, friends, stay nerdy.